We now have with us Mr. Ebbie Haan. He's an independent consultant and you've been in the industry for many, many years. It's good to have you here with us.
Thank you very much.
Now, I just like to get a sense of how things have changed for the African oil and gas industry over the years, perhaps the positives and the negatives.
Yes, well, things should change. That's change brings progress. So also on the African continent in the oil and gas sector, a lot of things have changed, say from the early development of oil and gas in the large provinces like Nigeria, Gabon, Algeria, to now a far more dispersed activity list all over the continent. Of course, the global economy has changed. World energy demand has changed. Green energy going forward. So I think it's overall the world has become more complex, and also the oil and gas sector in Africa. However, that doesn't necessarily pose bad news or threats. It also gives opportunities. I think the fast economic development on the continent and the fast population growth creates energy need, creates local market, and I think the oil and gas sector on the continent has a role to play, no longer as an exporter of energy, but in my view more as a supplier of local energy to grow the African economy and to create jobs. So I think a big opportunity is actually from export to local monetization and development of the economy, employment. And I think that's where the major challenge lies for the continent. There are issues, clearly. I think with any extractive industry, large capital investments, also sometimes sizable profits can be made. And as soon as large investment sums are mentioned, it also attracts the less desired effects of our industry. People think they can get outrageous profits, or people think anything is for free. I think in oil and gas you need to work for your money. You need to create an environment that you equally share the profits, and you have a sort of a higher purpose that you want to do of energizing Africa. So I think that's where the challenge lies. So who is going to create that environment where there's a friendly investment climate? So that's government, give legislative frameworks, tax incentives, etc. And where entrepreneurs come in and they invest and they get a fair return, but they don't necessarily get windfall profits. And I think sharing more equally with a longer-term vision, I think, is the future for Africa. You need to have a heart to invest in oil and gas in Africa. If you only have a mind to extract money, I think you create problems for yourself.
Who is creating that enabling environment? You said that that is the key. When you look at all the countries, we've had quite a lot of ministers at this event, all coming and in a way pitching their industries and saying why investors and operators should come to them or take a look at them or stick their eyes on them. But from everything that you've heard and from what you know, which of these countries in Africa would you say at the moment is the most attractive?
It's not easy to say which is the most attractive country. I think it is a bit more complex than that, because certain countries are further in their development of the natural resources than others. So it means that the legislation is more mature. It's probably a bit more tough on the investors, because the risk of developing the sector has been taken out. So it depends where you want to invest. If you want to invest in mature business, then it clearly certain countries can demand tougher conditions for investors, as opposed to when you have not discovered any hydrocarbons. However, the challenge is that for the mature countries, and say the large 10 countries on the continent where oil and gas has been found and is being produced, as oil price drops and the contracts have been signed in a higher environment, or the other way around, how flexible can you, in all fairness, discuss contractual terms to keep the investments going? I mean to say, if you took an opportunity when the oil price was $100 and now it is $50, and so you make less profit as an investor, is the government willing to give incentives to work in a low oil price environment? Conversely, if you signed a contract at $50 oil and it is now $100 oil and you make almost like obscene profits, do you think you should be giving back something to the nation. And I think in that space, a dialogue between investors and host governments is important, as is the contractor industry, because capital costs also have risen. Some engineering firms have asked outrageous rates during the big days, and of course now they offer their services as a discount. So I think if we can take the shocks out of the system and go a bit more smoothly with a long-term view in mind, it would greatly help the energy development of the African continent.
We're talking about how renewable energy is the future of Africa. You walk through the airport and there are signboards advertising this, but then you get a sense that Africa is not really ready for renewable energy. We definitely have the resource, so we have the sunlight, we have the wind, but we don't have the right infrastructure, we don't have the right skills. So what are your thoughts on this? Are we really ready for this?
Partially, but I also think renewable is not the only future for Africa. I think it has a place to play, and I think in the African continent, for instance, solar has a role to play in the rural areas because you don't need more infrastructure than a panel. Or if you see some of these small-scale mirrors for cooking out in the rural areas, so people don't burn charcoal. I think that those are good things. On a large scale, I think it is a matter of economics and infrastructure. And if a nation has oil and gas, which is, we know on the African continent, it is low-cost oil and gas, I think rightfully so, a local government would first develop that before they would go for, quite often, developing infrastructure for 100% reliance on renewable. So I think it is a mix. I think where renewable could work on solar or wind, you should do it. But I think what people quite often who make global policies which are from the northern hemisphere, they don't realize how large the African continent is. And they look at a map of Africa and they say, well, just you walk from north to south. It's one of the largest continents on the planet, and the distance is so large, and to develop the infrastructure that simply will prohibit, electrical grid in the short term from north to south, from east to west. So you need to have local centers, and as a consequence, if in local centers renewables work, do it. But if it doesn't work and you got oil and gas, I totally understand, stick to that. So I think it will take a longer time for Africa to transition to a cleaner energy source and also mobility of cars than it will do in other countries. And I'm totally fine with that.
I think I am as well. Thank you very much. Let's leave it there.
Thank you very much. Okay, bye-bye.